Question 1. What is the process of withholding reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior, resulting in a decrease in the future frequency of that behavior? A. Punishment. B. Extinction. C. Negative reinforcement. D. Shaping. Answer: B. Extinction. This question is defining extinction, a fundamental principle for decreasing behavior. The key phrase is withholding reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior, resulting in a decrease. Extinction happens when you stop giving the reward, reinforcement, that was making the behavior happen. Without that reward, the behavior gradually stops occurring or happens much less often over time. For example, if a child used to cry to get a specific toy, but now you stop giving the toy when they cry, the crying behavior is on extinction and should decrease. Remember, extinction is about stopping the payoff for the behavior. Question 2. When conducting direct observation for a functional behavior assessment, FBA, what type of data involves recording the events that happen immediately before and immediately after a behavior occurs? A. Scatterplot data. B. Interval data. C. Frequency data. D. ABC data. Answer: D. ABC data. This question asks about a common method used during the observation phase of a functional behavior assessment. FBA, to gather information about the behavior's function. ABC data stands for antecedent behavior consequence. It involves observing the behavior as it happens and recording exactly what happened right before the behavior. Antecedent, a clear description of the behavior itself and what happened right after the behavior. Consequence. This helps identify patterns and potential functions, why the behavior is occurring. Scatterplots look at patterns over time, interval data measures occurrence within time blocks, and frequency is just counting. ABC data directly captures the context around the behavior. Question 3. Providing reinforcement for a behavior that is a closer and closer approximation to the desired target behavior is known as A. Chaining. B. Prompting. C. Shaping. D. Generalization. Answer: C. Shaping. This question defines shaping. Shaping is a procedure used to teach new behaviors that the learner doesn't currently perform. You start by reinforcing any behavior that is even slightly similar to the goal behavior. Then you gradually raise the requirement, only reinforcing responses that are successively closer to the final desired behavior. It's like sculpting a behavior, reinforcing successive approximations. Chaining teaches a sequence of steps, prompting is providing help, and generalization is the behavior occurring in new situations. Shaping is all about reinforcing small steps that get you closer to the final skill. Question 4. What is the primary characteristic that defines a behavior as an operant behavior? A. It is involuntary and elicited by a stimulus. B. It is learned through association with a neutral stimulus. C. It is controlled by its consequences. D. It is always visible to others. Answer: C. It is controlled by its consequences. This question is about the definition of operant behavior, which is the main focus of ABA. Operant behavior is behavior that is influenced by what happens after it occurs, its consequences. We learn to do or not do operant behaviors based on whether they are followed by reinforcement, making the behavior more likely, or punishment, making it less likely. Voluntary actions like talking, walking, or completing a task are typically operant behaviors. Involuntary responses elicited by stimuli are responded behaviors. Operant behavior is shaped by its past outcomes. Question 5. A child gets a sticker every time they complete a puzzle. Completing puzzles increases in the future. This is an example of A. Negative reinforcement. B. Positive punishment. C. Positive reinforcement. D. Negative punishment. Answer: C. Positive reinforcement. This scenario illustrates positive reinforcement. The behavior is completing a puzzle, and the consequence is receiving a sticker. Something is added. Since receiving the sticker makes the puzzle completing behavior more likely in the future, it is reinforcement. Because something is added, the sticker, to increase the behavior, it is specifically positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement removes something to increase behavior. Punishment decreases behavior. This is adding a reward to make the behavior happen more. Question 6. When implementing an intervention, measuring the behavior before the intervention starts provides data known as A. Intervention data, B. Baseline data, C. Follow-up data, D. Probe data. Answer B. Baseline data. This question asks about baseline data, which is the measurement of the behavior exactly as it is before you begin any attempt to change it, your intervention. It's the starting point. Collecting baseline data is crucial because it gives you something to compare your intervention data to, allowing you to see if your intervention is actually having an effect on the behavior. Without baseline, you can't definitively say that any changes you see are due to your efforts. It's like taking a before picture. Question 7. Which verbal behavior operant is controlled by a verbal stimulus and has point-to-point correspondence but not formal similarity? A. Echoic, B. Mand, C. Tact, D. Intraverbal. Answer D. Intraverbal. This is a question about B. F. Skinner's analysis of verbal behavior, specifically focusing on the intraverbal. An intraverbal is a verbal response controlled by another verbal stimulus, like answering a question or filling in a blank, where there is not formal similarity. It doesn't sound or look exactly like the stimulus, but there is point-to-point correspondence. The sounds or words in the stimulus match the sounds or words in the response in sequence. An example is someone saying ready, set, and you say, go. Echoic have formal similarity and point-to-point correspondence, repeating exactly what was said. Mands are requests, and tacts are labels, the controlled by verbal stimulus, and no formal similarity. Clues point to intraverbal. Question 8. When assessing a client's preferences, which method involves presenting stimuli one at a time and recording whether the client approaches or interacts with it? A. Paired stimulus, forced choice, B. Multiple stimulus without replacement, MSDO, C. Single stimulus, successive choice, D. Free operant. Answer C. Single stimulus, successive choice. This question describes the single stimulus preference assessment method, also known as successive choice. In this method, you present items one by one and record how the individual interacts with each item, usually measuring approach, contact, or duration of interaction. It's the simplest method but doesn't require the individual to make a choice between items. Paired stimulus offers items in pairs. MSWO offers multiple items but removes chosen ones, and free operant just observes what the person does when items are available. Single stimulus is all about presenting one item at a time. Question 9. A consequence that, when removed following a behavior, makes that behavior less likely to happen in the future is called A. Positive punishment, B. Negative punishment, C. Positive reinforcement, D. Negative reinforcement. Answer B. Negative punishment. This question defines negative punishment. The crucial elements are when removed following a behavior, taking something away, which is the negative part, and makes that behavior less likely to happen in the future, the punishment part. Negative punishment means you take away something the person likes or has access to immediately after a behavior occurs, and as a result, that behavior happens less often in the future. For example, if a child argues, behavior, and you take away their video game time, removing something they like, and they argue less in the future, that's negative punishment. Taking away something good to decrease behavior. Question 10. What is the primary purpose of a written behavior objective or goal? A. To describe the function of the behavior. B. To identify the consequences that maintain the behavior. C. To clearly state what behavior should look like, under what conditions, and how we'll know it's achieved. D. To list all potential antecedents for the behavior. Answer: C. To clearly state what behavior should look like, under what conditions, and how we'll know it's achieved. This question is about the importance of writing clear behavior objectives or goals. A good objective is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. SMART. It needs to precisely describe the target behavior, what it looks like, topography, the conditions under which it should occur, when/where, antecedent/setting, and the criteria for success. How well/how often, measurement. This clarity ensures everyone knows exactly what they are working towards and how progress will be tracked. It's not just about function or consequences, but a clear roadmap for behavior change. Question 11. The physical environment or stimuli present before a behavior occurs is known as the A. Consequence, B. Response, C. Setting event, D. Antecedent. Answer: D. Antecedent. This question is another check on understanding the A in the three-term contingency. The antecedent is everything that happens in the environment just before the behavior takes place. It includes instructions, cues, sights, sounds, smells, or even the presence of certain people or objects. It's the context in which the behavior occurs. The response is the behavior itself, and the consequence happens after. A setting event is a broader environmental condition that might influence the likelihood of behavior, but isn't an immediate trigger. The antecedent is the immediate before event. Question 12. In teaching a child to follow the instruction, sit down, the therapist says, sit down, and the child sits. What is the child's action of sitting? A. The antecedent. B. The consequence. C. The behavior/response. D. The stimulus. Answer: C. The behavior/response. This question again uses the three-term contingency framework. The therapist saying sit down is the antecedent, specifically the SD. The child's action of sitting is the behavior or response. This is what the person does. What happens after the sitting, like getting praise, is the consequence. Understanding these three components is fundamental to analyzing and changing behavior. The child sitting is the specific action we are interested in measuring or teaching. Question 13. A schedule of reinforcement where the first response after a fixed amount of time is reinforced is called A. Fixed ratio, FR. B. Variable ratio, VR. C. Fixed interval, FI. D. Variable interval, VI. Answer: C. Fixed interval, FI. This question defines the fixed interval, FI, schedule of reinforcement. The key characteristics are that a fixed amount of time must pass, and then the first response after that time is what gets reinforced. For example, if you have an FI 5-minute schedule, you could respond 100 times during the 5 minutes, but only the very first response after the full 5 minutes is up will get you the reinforcer. This typically leads to that scallop pattern of responding mentioned in a previous question. The timer is fixed, and you need to respond after it rings, so to speak. Question 14. What is the main ethical principle behind conducting a functional behavior assessment, FBA? A. To ensure interventions are the least restrictive. B. To identify the maintaining variables, function, of a behavior to develop effective interventions. C. To justify the use of punishment procedures. D. To collect enough data to create a graph. Answer: B. To identify the maintaining variables, function, of a behavior to develop effective interventions. This question highlights the ethical importance of the FBA process. The core ethical reason we conduct FBAs is to understand why a behavior is happening, its function, so that we can develop interventions that are not only effective, but also address the root cause. Function-based interventions are generally more successful and ethical because they provide the individual with a more appropriate way to get their needs met or avoid unpleasant situations, rather than just suppressing the behavior without understanding its purpose. It guides us to choose interventions that teach new skills and address the underlying issues. Question 15. A decrease in the effectiveness of a reinforcer due to the individual having had too much of it recently, example, not wanting more cookies after eating a whole bag, is called A. Deprivation, B. Satiation, C. Extinction, D. Habituation. Answer: B. Satiation. This question describes satiation. Satiation occurs when an individual has had recent, excessive exposure to a reinforcer, making it less valuable or effective at that moment. If you've just eaten a huge meal, food is no longer a powerful reinforcer. You are satiated. Deprivation is the opposite, not having had enough of something, which makes it a more effective reinforcer. Extinction is stopping reinforcement for a behavior, and habituation is getting used to a stimulus. Satiation means you're full on that reinforcer for now. Question 16. When a learner uses a skill they learned in one setting, like saying hello in the therapy room, in different settings, like saying hello at school or the grocery store, this is called A. Discrimination, B. Stimulus generalization, C. Response generalization, D. Prompt dependence. Answer: B. Stimulus generalization. This scenario is an example of stimulus generalization. Stimulus generalization happens when a behavior that was taught and reinforced in the presence of one stimulus, the therapy room, occurs in the presence of different but similar stimuli or settings, school, grocery store. The stimulus, the setting, or person has changed, but the response, hello, stays the same. Discrimination is doing the behavior in one specific setting, but not others. Response generalization is doing different behaviors to the same stimulus. Stimulus generalization is about the behavior happening across different places or cues. Question 17. What is the definition of a prompt? A. A consequence that follows a behavior to increase or decrease it. B. An environmental event that occurs before a behavior. C. An additional stimulus added before or during a response to increase the likelihood of a correct response. D. The physical movement of the behavior itself. Answer: C. An additional stimulus added before or during a response to increase the likelihood of a correct response. This question defines a prompt. Prompts are temporary forms of assistance or extra cues that we use during teaching to help the learner perform the correct behavior when the natural stimulus, SD, is presented. They are added before or during the behavior to make it more likely the learner will get it right, so they can then receive reinforcement. Consequences happen after. Antecedents are the main cues, and the physical movement is the behavior itself. Prompts are the helpful nudges we fade out over time. Question 18. Which measurement method would be most appropriate for measuring how long a child spends engaged in playing with a specific toy during a play session? A. Frequency, B. Duration, C. Latency, D. Partial interval recording. Answer: B. Duration. This question asks for the best measurement method for measuring how long a behavior occurs. Duration is the measurement of the total time that a behavior occurs from start to finish. Since you want to know how long the child plays with the toy, duration is the most direct and accurate measure. Frequency counts how many times they play. Latency measures the time until they start playing. Partial interval recording only notes if they played at any point in an interval, which wouldn't tell you the total time. Question 19. A teacher tells the class, line up. The students get out of their seats and walk to the door. The instruction, line up, is functioning as a A. Consequence, B. Behavior, C. S delta, SD, D. Discriminative stimulus, SD. Answer: D. Discriminative stimulus, SD. This is another example of identifying the antecedent, specifically an SD. The instruction line up is a specific environmental cue that signals to the students that lining up behavior will be reinforced. Example, they get to go to lunch or recess. They avoid getting in trouble. It's the stimulus that sets the occasion for the behavior to occur because of the history of reinforcement associated with that cue. It's not a consequence, happens after. Behavior, what they do, or S delta, signals no reinforcement. It's the instruction that tells them what to do to get a good result. Question 20. What is the main purpose of conducting interim server agreement, IOA? A. To measure the behavior accurately. B. To determine if the intervention is effective. C. To check the consistency and reliability of data collection. D. To find out what reinforces the behavior. Answer. C. To check the consistency and reliability of data collection. This question asks about the purpose of IOA. IOA involves having two or more people independently observe and measure the same behavior at the same time, and then calculating how much their data agrees. The main reason we do this is to make sure our data collection is consistent and reliable. If observers agree closely, it increases confidence that the behavior definition is clear and the data being collected is accurate. It doesn't tell you if the intervention worked or the function of the behavior, but it ensures the quality of your measurement. Question 21. A procedure where a reinforcer is delivered for the occurrence of a behavior that is not the problem behavior is called. A. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, DRI. B. Differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, DRI. C. Differential reinforcement of other behavior, DRO. D. Response cost. Answer. B. Differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, DRA. This question describes differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, DRA. In DRA, you reinforce any behavior that is an alternative to the problem behavior. This alternative behavior doesn't have to be physically incompatible, like in DRI, just different from the problem behavior. For example, if a child screams for attention, problem behavior, you might reinforce them for tapping you on the shoulder or saying, "Excuse me." Alternative behaviors, to get attention instead. You reinforce the good or alternative behavior and put the problem behavior on extinction. DRO reinforces the absence of the behavior, and response cost is punishment. Question 22. A token economy is a system where individuals earn generalized conditioned reinforcers, tokens, for specific behaviors, which can later be exchanged for backup reinforcers. This system relies heavily on the principles of A. Punishment and extinction. B. Shaping and chaining. C. Positive reinforcement and conditioned reinforcement. D. Negative reinforcement and escape. Answer. C. Positive reinforcement and conditioned reinforcement. This question is about the core principles operating in a token economy. Token economies work by using positive reinforcement. You add tokens, something desirable, contingent on desired behaviors to make those behaviors more likely. The tokens themselves are conditioned reinforcers because they get their value from being exchangeable for backup reinforcers, the things the person actually wants, which might be primary or other conditioned reinforcers. While extinction might be used for problem behaviors within the system, the primary mechanisms driving a token economy are positive reinforcement using conditioned reinforcers. Question 23. When assessing potential reinforcers for a client, which method is generally the most informal and involves simply watching what the client chooses to do when given free access to a variety of items and activities? A. Paired stimulus preference assessment. B. Multiple stimulus with replacement preference assessment. C. Free operant observation. D. Ask the client or significant others. Answer. C. Free operant observation. This question describes the free operant observation method of preference assessment. The key phrase is simply watching what the client chooses to do when given free access. In a free operant setting, you make multiple items or activities available to the individual and simply observe which ones they interact with, how often, and for how long, without any specific demands or structured choices. This gives a naturalistic look at what the individual prefers. Asking is indirect, and paired stimulus/multiple stimulus involves structured presentations and choices. Free operant is the most hands-off direct observation method. Question 24. A written behavior reduction plan should always include A. Only punishment procedures. B. A clear definition of the target behavior to decrease and strategies to decrease it. C. Strategies to increase alternative replacement behaviors. D. Both B and C are essential components. Answer. D. Both B and C are essential components. This question is about the necessary components of a behavior reduction plan. While the goal is to decrease a problem behavior, which requires a clear definition of that behavior and strategies to reduce it, it's crucial in ABA to also include strategies to teach and increase appropriate replacement behaviors. The principle is that behavior serves a function, and if you reduce a problem behavior without teaching a better way for the person to get their needs met, the problem behavior, or a new one, is likely to return. A good plan decreases the old behavior and increases a new functional one. Question 25. Which principle states that if the opportunity to engage in a high probability behavior, something the individual does often, is made contingent on the occurrence of a low probability behavior, something they don't do often, the low probability behavior will increase? A. The law of effect. B. The matching law. C. The Premack principle. D. Stimulus equivalence. Answer. C. The Premack principle. This question describes the Premack principle, often referred to as Grandma's law. It states that a more probable behavior, something you're likely to do, can be used as a reinforcer for a less probable behavior, something you're less likely to do. The opportunity to do the high probability behavior is made contingent on completing the low probability behavior. For example, first clean your room, low P, then you can watch TV, high P. Watching TV is the reinforcer for cleaning the room. The law of effect is about consequences influencing behavior likelihood. The matching law describes how behavior is distributed across different reinforcement schedules. Stimulus equivalence is about relationships between stimuli. Premack is about using activities as reinforcers based on their probability.